So on the web, typically when we embed something like a video player or an audio player, that player is being rendered inside of an iframe. And if we're trying to render that iframe inside of a Hotwire application, we run into a browser behavior where the iframe gets reloaded if the location of the iframe gets moved around in the document. And to see this, let's start playing a video here. And if we look at the elements, we have our turbo frame. And I'm just going to take this turbo frame and I'm going to move it. And what you'll see is that when I move this to the end of the body, this video here is actually going to restart. And that's not a behavior that Hotwire does. That's something that the browser is doing itself. When you reparent or rehome an iframe, the browser will reload the iframe content. So to try and get around that, what I want to do is actually inject a turbo frame in between the head tag and the body tag so that it is outside of the domain of control of turbo drive. So let's take a look at this. So let me just refresh so we have our most up-to-date information. I'm going to start playing Megan Trainor's video here. And if we look at the elements, what you'll see is that we have our head tag, we have our body tag, and then we have our turbo frame here in between. Now, I can't statically render a turbo frame in between the head and the body tag, because if I do that on initial page load, the browser will, let me just pause this, the browser will put it into the body tag. But if we inject it via JavaScript, the browser doesn't seem to have a problem with it. And now that our turbo frame is loaded, what you can see is that we can navigate around the app using application visits, and we can even go back and forth in our browser history, and our iframe persists without being reloaded, which kind of allows us to sidestep that browser native behavior. So let's take a look at how this is happening. If we jump into my page layout template, I have at the bottom of my body tag here a template element. And the template element is inert, meaning it doesn't render anything and it's not interactive until we do something with its content. The content of the template in this case is the turbo frame that we want to insert in between our head and our body tags. Now you'll notice that our template here is associated with a stimulus controller. The role of the player template controller is simply to inject a single instance of this into the page. So let's take a look at our stimulus controller. As you can see, this is doing almost nothing. In the connect lifecycle callback, which gets called whenever the controller instance is bound to the host element, all we're going to do is look to see if the document already contains the injected turbo frame, and if it doesn't, then we're going to clone the template and inject it into the HTML document before the body tag. And that's why, again, if we refresh here, you'll see this turbo frame show up right before the body. That's what that player controller is doing. And at this point, we now have a turbo frame in the document with ID player. And if we look at our main page, which has the two video links, what you can see is all it's doing is using the data turbo frame attribute to target the player frame, the player turbo frame, instead of the top level document. And this is going to cause this URL to be loaded inside of our turbo frame. The video page is relatively simple. I'm taking some sort of an ID, I'm mapping that onto a YouTube embed source, and then here I have to have the corresponding turbo frame ID so that the transclusion of content matches up with the template in our main page layout. And then I just have an iframe. And here I have some close buttons. You can see that this is actually progressively enhanced. So if I open this up in a new window, it'll render outside of the main page layout, and then I can go back home. So in that way, it kind of progressively enhances. But again, what we're seeing, the main goal here is to be able to get an iframe to persist across page navigation events without being reset, even as we go about navigating and restoring state within the application. And the reason it can do that is because this turbo frame is in between the head and the body tag. When we understand how turbo drive works, it works by merging the contents of the head tag and replacing the contents of the body tag. So anything outside of the head and the body tag is technically outside of the state management purview of turbo drive. However, just because it's outside of the state management part, we can still target turbo frames in our navigation events, which is pretty exciting. I will say that there are probably accessibility concerns here, rendering something outside of the body. So I would proceed with caution when you have a lot of content that you might want to render in this way. But for something like a persistent video player, I don't know, if you squint hard enough, maybe you can get around it. But I'm not an accessibility expert by any means, not even close. So don't take what I say here with any particular weight. But anyway, I was excited to be able to get around this behavior. So feeling like some possibilities are going to be opened up.